replace the one that was struck last November. Iran and 6 world powers are back at the negotiating table today, seeking to agree terms on a comprehensive nuclear deal, and yet deeply divided over exactly what that deal should look like. Indeed, at the very start of the talks, Tehran drew an early red line saying that no nuclear sites would be closed, or Tehran wouldn't consider closing any of its nuclear sites. Those world powers meeting to try to reach a comprehensive deal to replace that deal that saw some limited sanctions relief for some efforts on the part of Iran to curb its nuclear program. That was last November. We're going to be discussing that tonight here in the studio with my guests. I'm joined here in the newsroom by Sanam SHANTYAEI, who's a France 24 journalist and has long lived in Tehran before and recently returned. We'll be looking forward to hearing about your views of the changes that the country has seen recently. Also here in the newsroom with me, Milad JOKAR, who is a political analyst specialized in the Middle East and in Iran. Thank you for being with us. We're also joined from Washington by Robert ZARATE, who's a policy director for the Foreign Policy Initiative. And also we're joined tonight from Lund in Sweden by Rouzbeh, PARSI, who's a senior lecturer at Lund University. Thank you to all of you for being with us. Well, let's have a look, first of all, at that first day of talks over in Vienna aimed at finding a comprehensive deal on Iran's nuclear program.
Iran meets the West once again in the first tentative steps towards a final deal that could end over a decade of failed initiatives and rising tensions. The landmark interim agreement struck in November last year gave hope that an historic breakthrough could be within reach. Under the agreement, Iran scaled back its most sensitive nuclear activities on January 20th and began to convert its stockpile of enriched material. It also pledged to halt advances on the new reactor being built at Arak and granted additional inspection rights to the IAEA. In exchange, the 6 powers offered up some €4.4 billion worth of sanctions relief and pledged to hold off on any new nuclear-related sanctions. The next stage, however, will prove to be much trickier, and both sides have downplayed the chances of success. Iran wants a complete lifting of sanctions, and the West wants to define the scope of the Iranian nuclear program and resolve concerns that Tehran is seeking an atomic bomb. Iran insists on its right to a peaceful nuclear program and refuses to dismantle its nuclear infrastructure as a matter of national pride. Of the anticipated sticking points, these are what could potentially derail the talks. The underground Fordo enriching facility is problematic as it's heavily fortified against aerial attack. Iran refuses to tear it down, but a possible compromise could be repurposing the facility for storage. The Arak heavy water reactor is a concern for the P5+1 as they want to remove any capability to produce plutonium. Iran argues that construction is too advanced to convert to a light water reactor. A possible compromise would be to convert it anyway as a face-saving measure. The real stumbling block, however, is Iran's centrifuges. Rumoured to have around 20,000, Iran doesn't want to give up any and wants to upgrade their processing capabilities. The West, however, wants this number reduced to a few thousand and rejects the option of upgrading the technology. With neither side willing to move, a solution to the stalemate appears distant at best.
There, a look there at the talks and what's at stake. Milad JOKAR, if so much was made about what had been achieved in Geneva last November, it was because it was the first breakthrough after a decade of deadlock. But in a sense, that was the easy part.
Yeah, that was the first part that was necessary to bring trust between Iran and the 3+3 or 5+1. This was an interim deal that was important to build confidence between the two and to bring communications between the two blocks. Now we're moving toward the most difficult part of the agreement, which is to find a comprehensive deal. So it will take time. Today they are meeting up together to talk and try to find the contours of a roadmap And so we should not expect anything to be signed today, but it will give a vision for what can be done within the next month. But so far, things have moved into the right direction because the IAEA next report, it will most probably report, according to some Western diplomats, it will report that Iran has respected its commitment, and in return, some minor sanctions have been lifted. So let's see what will be next.
Robert Zarat joining us from Washington. Do you agree that this is a process that is on the right track and that in fact there is room for optimism even as this round of talks gets underway in Vienna?
Well, you know, I'm personally pessimistic about this. I think it is a big deal that the United States and Iran and other world powers are in negotiations. But quoting Supreme Leader Khamenei himself, he said this weekend that the nuclear negotiations will lead nowhere. And President Obama himself has said, at best, there's a 50-50 chance of the negotiations leading to a final agreement. But here in Washington, I think that what people are most focused on are two things. One, the extent to which the interim agreement will be credibly enforced, and that's why you see the debate, especially on Capitol Hill, over sanctions, but also on where this agreement could actually end up. You know, a lot of people are worried about the sort of deal that the Obama administration might be willing to accept, and you've seen efforts by members of the U.S. Congress to try to condition what a final agreement would look like. So, you know, I think there are two fronts here. There's a front in Europe, Vienna, Geneva, etc., wherever the negotiations are, but also within Washington, D.C. itself.
Let's put the question now to Rouzbeh PARSI. Ali Khamenei has been expressed little hope that these talks would go anywhere. Obama himself, as we just heard from Robert Zarat, said there was a 50-50 chance. And we heard at the very start of these talks today, Tehran make clear from the outset that it would not consider closing any of its nuclear facilities. Are we not in for almost certain dashed hopes as these talks progress over the next few days?
No, I don't think so. I think that what we're looking at is the posturing that both sides do before they start the negotiations. So it's partly towards each other, but it's also partly towards all the hardliners on both sides who don't want anything to come out of this process. So it's about managing the expectations and making sure that people understand that this is the beginning of a process. They have 6 months to make this work, and this is just the beginning. So no one should expect any miracles. And it will be difficult, but it's not that dead certain that it's not going to happen at all.
The big question, Sanam, SHANTYAEI, had been when Hassan Rouhani took over. The question had been how much of a moderate would he be? What kind of changes would he be able to make? Would it lead to any substantial shift on the nuclear question? And would he be able to make any of those changes under the current system and with Ali Khamenei in charge? You've been to Iran recently after living there for years under the previous regime. Is your sense that this is a man with sufficient leeway, this is a man with moderate enough convictions to make the sorts of changes that the world is looking for?
This is a man that made promises during his election campaign, one of which was lifting the sanctions to ease Iran's economic problems. Now, we also have to remember that Rouhani managed to sign an agreement with the West in 2003 when he was the country's nuclear negotiator, in which the country stopped its uranium enrichment. But we also have to acknowledge the fact that he's facing a lot of criticism back in Iran from the hardliners. Now, as always, Iranians themselves are very much divided on this nuclear issue. You have a group of Iranians who believe that stakes are extremely high, that this is a wonderful opportunity for Iran to start thawing relations with the West after years and years of tension. In addition to that, this is a fantastic opportunity of reprieve in terms of the economic problems that the country has been facing. We have to remember that Iran has had an inflation of 40%. The country's oil sector was hit really badly. Iran admitted last year that it was losing from $4 to $8 billion US per month because of the sanctions imposed on the oil sector. In addition to that, the price of food was increasing dramatically. There was a shortage of medicine. So you have this group of Iranians that are championing the talks. But then the hardliners, as I mentioned earlier, the critics of the nuclear agreement, are concerned that Iran is giving up too much and losing its leverage within the region. And in essence, you can see some change within the attitudes of Iranians that I was meeting whilst I was in the country. But obviously nothing dramatic is going to happen until this final agreement is hopefully thrashed out.
That is the danger, Milad, JOKAR, that even as talks go on in Vienna, each party will be playing to his own constituents. We heard a moment ago Robert Zarate mention the fact that Obama has to keep an eye, of course, on the hawks back in Congress. Hassan Rouhani has to keep an eye on those constituents within Iran who do not want to see progress with world powers, or in any case, who do not want to see Iran look weak on this issue.
Absolutely. Iran does not want to look weak, as you just said, and this is why they have set up some red lines in terms of right to enrich. So this is why it is very delicate for Rouhani and Foreign Minister Javad Zarif to deal with these hardliners. So there are many red lines that they will maybe talk about these issues in Vienna, but like enrichment, Iran wants the recognition of its right to enrich, and this is not something that can be touched in Iran. And also hardliners in the US, we have seen recently that the big debate in Congress was whether or not more sanctions should be implemented, voted on against Iran. The United States intelligence community has clearly stated that more sanctions would sabotage diplomacy. Also, AIPAC has declared that we need to give diplomacy a chance, but of course, they will not, if there is a failure in talk, they will not wait to impose more pressure. So the pressure is on both sides. So this is why it is important for the moderate forces to gain space in order to be able to negotiate the comprehensive issues.
The real pressure, Robert Zarate, is going to be on the world powers meeting with Tehran, the Security Council plus Germany, to make concessions towards Tehran, is it not? This is, after all, the first opportunity there has been within the last decade of some sort of deal, and concessions are going to have to be made in the direction of Hassan Rouhani.
Well, a couple of things. I'm hearing from the other speakers here, Mr. JOKAR, Mr. PARSI, and Ms. SHANTYAEI, about how in Iran they're drawing red lines. I'll remind the audience that about 10 years ago, this agreement right here, which is the EU framework for a long-term agreement between Iran and the EU3, offered deals that pale in comparison to anything that's currently on the table, certainly pale in comparison to what the sort of sanctions relief we see today. You know, yes, there is posturing in both Washington and Iran, but what actually worries me is that the posturing you see in Iran is actually coming not from the parliament, but from Rouhani himself, drawing red lines in his administration, saying that we will not dismantle a single centrifuge and we will not get rid of these facilities. All this draws, by the way, world attention away from the crux of the issue, which is the fact that Iran, for almost 30 years, hid a host of nuclear activities from the watch of the International Atomic Energy Agency. And towards that end, actually cooperated with people such as A.Q. Khan, the runner of the Pakistani nuclear Walmart, to get centrifuge designs. Iran built facilities outside the gaze of the world's watch. For example, in Fordo, an enrichment facility built deep within the mountain on land that's owned by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. There are a lot of data points here suggesting that the Iranian program has been less than peaceful and actually military. Look at the Parshinan site, where there were tests relevant to detonating a nuclear explosive conducted, and Iran has refused to discuss that within the scope of the negotiations. And so Iran has been drawing a lot of red lines, and you're talking about the West offering concessions. What I see is the West that's been overeager to give concessions, and an Iran that's unwilling to really give serious concessions. Bear in mind, and this is my last point, the interim agreement begins dismantling the international sanctions regime against Iran. The interim agreement, however, does not require Iran to dismantle a single centrifuge. It does not require Iran to ship out to foreign control a single kilogram of enriched uranium, and nor does it require Iran to dismantle a heavy water reactor at Iraq that a former Clinton, an Obama official had called a plutonium bomb-producing factory. So that's how I see, and that's how many people in Washington, D.C. see the balance of concessions currently.
I'd like to put that to Rouzbeh PARSI. It's an interesting point. All these red lines, this is surely the opportunity at last for Iran to show, as it's been claiming for so long, that it does not have any ambitions to build a nuclear bomb.
Absolutely. But I think, we have to remember that everyone draws red lines all the time, but then they have to negotiate about them, and then it looks rather different. As for what Iran has done and not done, this is a negotiation process. This is about finding a way of a compromise that leaves everyone with something, but not with everything. So this is not about perfect justice, but this is about coming through a process where Iran will do whatever it is doing in terms of nuclear enrichment under safeguards that are so strict that everyone can live with that enrichment. So on the one hand, that is our goal. On the other hand, we also have to acknowledge that Iran will have nuclear enrichment whether we like it or not. So this is not a process where we can say, well, they shouldn't have any, and we somehow have a way of making sure that they don't have any enrichment. That ship has passed. And that is something that, particularly on the American side, many people in Congress seem to fail to understand. So yes, there are red lines on all sides. There's a lot of posturing. But Iran is not really getting everything it wants without giving up anything. That's reading the interim agreement the way the devil would read the Bible. That's not really what we're looking at the moment. And as for the main sanctions, the ones that have not been lifted and will only be lifted through the framework of a permanent agreement, that sanctions relief will take years to implement. So on that one, the Iranians will actually be sticking out their neck without getting much in return.
Milad, JOKAR, the same question to you. Why is Iran not taking the opportunity at this particular stage to put its cards on the table and show exactly what it has and doesn't, and make it clear that it is willing to make concessions?
First of all, I would like to say that many things have changed since 2003 with the previous deal that was on the table. Like during the Bush administration, we remember that the Bush policy was zero enrichment in Iran. And, the bottom line is that Iran will not accept discrimination, and so it is a signatory of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. There are some concerns about the nature of its nuclear program. This is why there has been one first deal, interim deal in Geneva in November, which is not complete, but this is a first step necessary. And then we will have a comprehensive deal. Now, on the thing that on the table, there will be many different issues. Fordo, which is deeply underground, but we are hearing many, the terminology, we should be careful of this. The term to dismantle is not used in the joint plan of action. Iran will not accept to dismantle its nuclear facilities. It is not part of the joint plan of action. So a recognition of enrichment below 5% would be something acceptable for the West. From this, we have to see what the negotiations will be. But now the thing is that there are more structures and confidence to go forward with this negotiation. And also, I wanted to say that what is important, we have senior officials saying prior to the talk that, yes, they are satisfied with the Iran's commitment and the joint plan of action.
Well, so we're going to come back to that point just after the break. Just a couple of minutes. We'll be back with the second part of tonight's debate.